Good morning. It's Gene Inger, opening remarks over an hour into market action. Yep, I'm holding up the gel version of the steroid drug that is being widely talked about this morning as somehow being a miracle cure for COVID-19. And I will tell you, it is not exactly that, but it is helpful. Number one, they have been using steroids all along. Some time ago, I mentioned a doctor acquaintance that was at NYU, had a heart attack at night, but he's in ICU. He got sick. He recovered, is home. That's good. And at the same time, I mentioned that they had him on not just hydroxychloroquine and Z-Pak, but on steroids. And indeed, I've mentioned several times that reduction of inflammation is important in helping people with the advanced situation if they end up with problems with the lungs. So I think some people went crazy about it this morning. It is not a data-driven trial yet. The trial is so large, as the BBC reported the Oxford study today, that you have to assume, and I discussed this already with a doctor friend of mine, that this was probably simply thrown at people in the ICU. But I'm glad it works. I think it's terrific. I think some people have been just lunatics about it today, but it's one more step in the direction of taking death off the table if one does get confronted with active COVID-19 disease that lands one in the hospital. Apparently, it does not do a thing on early patients, and it's not a preventative. It doesn't mean you don't get sick. What it does mean is that your chances of dying while on a ventilator, which no majority ends up on anymore, because that's an old approach, is the case. So I think it's progress. It's important. It's not really. It's a breakthrough in understanding of something they've already been doing for months with respect to COVID patients. So, and I will also say this to those that, and I had people that like how I've covered COVID, and I have someone who says, "Oh, only talk about stocks and sectors." Perhaps they don't realize that this stock market is very much tied to what happens with COVID. This stock market is very much tied to what happens with Trump, and the protests even impact how that goes. Can't please everybody. I had one gentleman who's in Hong Kong who sent a note saying that he was for the protesters in Hong Kong until his businesses fell apart, and then now he's in favor of Beijing's law. So he says I should stop supporting the protest. Why should I? I'm just expressing the opinions and reflecting what's going on. And I will tell you, the stock market this morning would not have been as strong as it was at the opening if not for the cortisone-related drug, of which there are hundreds of almost variations of cortisones and steroids. And putting it all together and is another story. Maybe it will even help in an earlier stage. We don't know that yet. They haven't tried that yet. But what we do know is it is making progress. We do know that I've been more optimistic about how this gets resolved. I've been more optimistic, I mentioned that just last night, than the University of Minnesota gentleman with respect to getting a drug, and have felt all along that's more important than a vaccine. So while I don't deny and in fact expect a second wave, if we're not in a continuation of the first wave of the disease, I think the hospitals, I've said this all along, are better able and prepared to handle it, to treat it, and they have more experience with the different combinations that they've used to confront this enemy. This is what this year is about. This was a market that was holding together, that would have had a more nominal correction going back to February, March, than what it did if it were not for the attack of the pandemic. So I think that this is important. Perhaps I've talked about it too much at times, but on the other hand, I think we've tried to focus on the key points, and I think that's true with politics as well. And I actually want to thank another member who sent me a note yesterday saying that I'm trying to balance not right and left, not conservative or liberal, but sort of an independent view. He said I gave the best reality check on what's going on, and I appreciate that very much. So I don't understand. And then I get a note of almost in a hostile manner suggesting that this is not how you approach the market. Well, if that person knows better how to approach the market, by all means tell me. And if I should ignore everything and believe that technical analysis operates in a vacuum, then I guess we can do that. But I guess I'm at an age where I think I know better about that. But in any event, be that as it may, the stock market is behaving from a technical fashion. It did bounce off the 200-day moving average. It is struggling with the 200-day moving average. And from a technical perspective, that is what matters in this market environment at the moment. So let's go to the charts now that I've had my say about the morning activity. And yes, I think Mr. Kramer, I heard him while I was shaving, was a bit nuts. If you think I'm overly focused on COVID, try Kramer. David thought that he was a bit, that he was a lunatic this morning. But and he is, in a sense that no, he does not have the cure to COVID in his medicine cabinet that he takes for his migraine. And I hope if he has a migraine, I hope he doesn't end up with a stroke live on the air. But my God, my half sister just had a stroke. But in any event, and I try to stay calm enough so that nothing like that happens, because I'm not a spring chicken. But in any event, the S&P is at 3080. It's going to push back up here through this gap. It's consolidating. It will probably sell off a little now because it was up out of the box. And intraday traders and intra-week traders don't like markets that are up out of the box. Once in a while, they'll hold together through this session. Normally, they don't. Target of this move is hard to gauge. It could be a flash in the pan because, first of all, what I'm telling you, and after talking to a doctor friend about it, what they have with this medication is not what is being described on television. In fact, I'm going to quote messages from one of my physician friends who has decades of experience in oncology. He says a good trial has all sorts of screening and quality assurance that the people in the treated and non-treated groups have extremely similar, if not close to identical, correlated factors. To get this many patients in this trial, this is what I shared earlier, and get it done so quickly means they pretty much threw the dexamethasone at anybody who would accept it under the auspices of a trial. Their control group probably was not even aware they were in a trial. That's where they were so many people in the control group. And then he says, I wouldn't be surprised if the journal that is considering accepting it for publication, if they do, ends up throwing it out in a few months, just like the Lancet and another journal did for the hydroxychloroquine reports. Then he says, don't get stupid like Kramer and call this the breakthrough that saves the world. Okay, I didn't, and I won't. but and I'm not saying Kramer is stupid, but yeah, he did get carried away, to say the least. So there's your daily S&P chart. Market selling off. They'll probably bounce it back. In fact, I think they will to mid-session. But that's the pattern that we are dealing with just now. The S&P on the 5-minute chart, you can see the drop back. It's trying to stabilize. It wants to fill this gap, but I don't think it'll do much more on the downside before it tries to bounce. But no, I don't think the market's going dramatically higher. And the boys are back to saying, oh, it's a bull market again. Well, it hasn't changed. And again, that's the idea of rescuing the country from COVID, of getting the economy going again, of putting in a low point in March amidst max fear, and we come up. Of course, it's not a bargain now. And no, you shouldn't be chasing, in my opinion, the big expensive stocks. We're not going to break down many sectors because we usually don't. But we do talk about what's moving and what's not, and the focus remains the S&P. As you can see, it's starting to firm, and I think it should firm somewhat going back into mid-session, but that doesn't mean new highs for the day. Industrial average is up 301, 298, and that's 300, and that's about cutting the early rally more than in half. The transports are up 68. The New York Composite is up 141, and part of the market's pullback is because you had Chairman Powell staying on message of an uncertain path of economic recovery, and that's fine. Also, I mentioned North Korea last night. Again, people say, does that matter? Yes, it does. Does China matter? Absolutely. And Kim Jong-un, or his sister, whoever's running the place now, has destroyed the joint North-South Korean office as a rebuke to Seoul. Either that or there's something else going on with North Korea that is generally unknown. You've got 4-1 advances over declining issues right now, 2350 to 513. The New York tick is a plus 500. The VIX is up 0.46. The Russell is up 35 points. The 10-year yield is up 0.03. The 30-year yield up 0.06. Now this is good because I want these rates slightly in a range perhaps, but slightly firmer. I didn't want to see the 10-year drop more, which can actually be deleterious and support the idea of going Japan more and being more like a negative interest rate policies. Dollar index up 0.51. Bank stock index up 0.91. Bitcoin rebounding only 40. NASDAQ up 102. NDX up 108. These continue to be the dominant leaders in this market. Semiconductor index up 26, and you've got the oil index up 17, with crude oil up 93 cents this morning, GLD up 0.28, and silver up 5 cents. As far as individual stocks today, it's mixed. Amgen up 511. And no, the drug stocks won't come down a lot. Those that are involved with trying to address COVID-19. And you can't look at them just on charts. But the reason they won't come down a lot is because the steroid approach is for serious patients. And as far as what's known at the moment, is not something that has anything to do with resolving or preventing infection. Whereas, like some believe, whether it's vitamin D and zinc and C, and just having the immune system stronger, some people are going to resist it, and they may become infected, they may be carriers, but they won't have active disease. I think that's a goal too. Apple up 588, Ameren down, up a penny. We can relate this. They're involved in a trial where Vascepa is also being used with other drugs to see if it helps reduce inflammation. And therefore, same thing. It's not a steroid. It's an omega in a sense, but it's only part of the fish oil. That's good because it reduces plaque in the arteries, reduces inflammation, reduces risk of heart attack and stroke, and may be helpful with respect to COVID. So that becomes interesting. Amazon up $25. AMD down 39 cents. Athersys down 16 cents. Boeing up 5.89, Delta up 62 cents, and as things come back and people get more confidence that they're not going to drop dead if they get COVID, they'll be flying more. It all interrelates. Disney up 45 cents. Maybe this will help their late summer attendance, if we're not in a hurricane, at Disney World. FLIR up $1, as infrared monitoring remains very important, but it corrected. Now it's firming again. Gilead up 28 cents. Google up $19. IBM up $2.95. Facebook $2.60 ahead. Intel up 12 cents. JetBlue up 23 cents. Lightpath down 6 cents, $2.97. Hard to say. This happened yesterday too. Seller comes in, buyer takes it up. Seller comes in, we'll see if buyer takes it up again. I suspect so. Don't know why a little bit of volatility. Somebody is still moving out of it, so that's sort of interesting. And somebody is moving in. Volume's 166,000. Volume has been running higher than average. Microsoft up 503. Netflix up 778. Pluristem down 48 cents. Nvidia down 728. Ceragon down 10 cents. Telephone up 17 cents. Actually, it was 80 cents higher, and that's a Dow and S&P component, so that's part of your pressure in the market, actually, as it came back down. Texas Instruments up and down. Texas Instruments up 167, and Exxon is also almost $2 off its high, but up 81 cents. You take Exxon, Telephone, and Boeing and put them together, with Boeing $13 off its high of the morning, and you have essentially a good representation of why the Dow is up 350 points instead of 650 points. Back later. Good morning.